Hi, TVT. Here's a quick history of Israel from the very beginning until October 7th, 2023. Of course, all stories about Israel begin with the Torah itself, when God tells Abraham, Lech lecha, go from your land to a land that I will show you. The land that God will show Abraham is the land of Israel. God, have brought you out of Ur Kasdim to assign you this land as possession. That land is the land of Israel. Know well your offspring shall be strangers in a land not their own. That land is Egypt, but they will return to Israel in the fourth generation. Later on in the fourth book of the Torah, Parshat Maseh, actually God gives Moshe the boundaries of that land of Israel. And look in the red here in this map, you'll see the boundaries that are given in the Torah itself. The green is Israel today, so it's remarkably similar. When the Israelites get into the land of Israel after the Torah ends into the book of Navi and Joshua and Kings, we see King Saul creating a kingdom about big as the purple. King David expands that to all of the yellow, and it's a little bit smaller under the reign of King Solomon. So if the Israelites are there living in the land of Israel, why do they leave? Well, they don't leave on their own volition. They are kicked out. There are three moments, early moments in Jewish history, where the Israelites are made to leave Israel. Number one, in 586 BCE, the Babylonians come in, destroy the first temple, send everyone off to the land of Iraq or Babylonia. 70 years later, they're given permission to come back. Some come back, build a second temple, and the Israelites flourish there and grow. That's the story of the Maccabees. They become pretty big. The empire becomes pretty big again. Then in 70 CE, the Romans come in and destroy the second temple. They send everyone away again, and they also decide to rename the land of Israel. They rename it Palestine, thinking that, if we change the name, we're going to change the Israelites' connection with this land. Well, actually, not everyone leaves at that point. A lot of them just go to the outskirts of the land itself. And in 70 years later, they come back, around 70 years later, they come back and try to retake Israel again in the Bar Kokhba rebellion. It is crushed, and people are sent away once again to the exile or diaspora or galut. In 1850, you'll notice that here is where the majority of Jews are in the world. There are not many Jews living in Israel. Actually, there are some, but not many. There are about 25,000 Jews living in Israel at that time. The Jews have always found Israel to be a central place, but most people are not living there. Only the very religious, and they're a rather very poor community. And the great miracle of the Jewish story is actually that the Jewish religion could survive outside of the land that it calls home. And how did it do that? It did that by always remembering, always keeping the hope alive that Jews would one day return to the land that they were given in the Torah, that they would return to a land that they were forcibly asked to leave from. So the amazing creativity of Judaism in general is that even without being in a land, the focus of the heart and the focus of the attention of the mind could be always directed at this place called Yisrael. I'm pointing now to 1850 above on this, and let's just keep in mind that the French Revolution happens in 1780, American Revolution 1776. So on the mind of the world, even 100 years later, is the idea that people have the right to be free, to have identity for themselves, to think about who they are, where they belong, and where they ultimately want to be. In 1894, we have a really important Jewish moment in history when a high-ranking, very unreligious, religious French officer is publicly humiliated and called a spy. This is Lord Alfred Dreyfus, and he is publicly humiliated in France and all around him, even though he is not a religious Jew. Because he is Jewish, everyone starts yelling, "Death to the Jews, death to the Jews." And less from that event itself, but who is reporting on that event. Here is Theodor Herzl, who is looking at this event and saying, "Oh my goodness, here is a high-ranking person that you couldn't even distinguish between being Jewish or not Jewish, and yet everyone knows he's Jewish. He's being falsely declared guilty because he is Jewish. This tremendous act of anti-Semitism makes Theodor Herzl go back to his room and start writing a book that will become called The Jewish State. In 1896, he publishes this, talks about Zionism, talks about the need for Jews to have a place of their own, a place where they can be free, a place where they do not have to worry about being oppressed. Because even though during this time of the period, during diaspora, during the exile of Jews, it was not a very great life for Jews living as a minority in these lands. They were subject to the whims of the population, which was often anti-Jewish, and it was a pretty difficult place to be a minority during the many years of exile. So Theodor Herzl makes it his life mission to get people excited about a Jewish state, and this excitement starts a program of Jews and Jewish organizations buying land in Israel. Arabs living there want to sell, and Jews want to buy. And so we see over a 30-year, 40-year period, Jews buying up land in Israel. And interestingly enough, in 1948, when the United Nations comes in and divides Israel into a partly Jewish state, partly Arab state, interestingly enough, the land that is given to the Jewish people follows the land that has already been bought by Jewish people during that time period. Coincidence? I think not. Okay, so because of all of those land purchases, we see Jews coming, 30,000 come to Israel in the first Aliyah, 40,000 in the second Aliyah. And now we see the year coming to 1914. Of course, you know that is close to the World War I years. And in 1970, right, the World War I ends in 1918. And an amazing statement is said by the people who are going to be winning the war, World War I, and the people who, because of winning that war, will actually control the area called Palestine. This is a statement made by Lord Balfour to Rothschild in 1917. He is part of the English government and says that His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. This is an incredible, exciting moment for the Jewish people and spurs on even more immigration to Israel, 35,000 here, and then in the next wave, 67,000 Jews coming. This is called the years of the Yishuv. So even though the British are in control of Palestine, a government, a government in waiting begins for the Jewish people there called the Yishuv, and even the beginnings of an Israeli army start during that time. But in about the year 1936, the Palestinians living in the area, the Arabs living in the area called Palestine, who are kind of loosely organized, but really not very organized, start to say, hey, what are all these Jews doing in here? This is our land, not their land. And there starts to be fighting between the Jews and the Arabs living in Palestine, and the British act as the peacekeepers. And often this peacekeeping is not fun and is often very bloody as well. So much so that in 1937 they say, we have a way to try to keep the peace. Let's divide this land. This is called the Peel Commission, 1937. Israel is given about 20% of the land, and the Palestinians are given about 70, with some held by the British. Israel says it's not really what we want, but we will take it. The Palestinian Arabs say, no, we want it all, or we want nothing. And the British say, well, we tried, we're leaving. That's right. The British announced that we are out of this enterprise of keeping peace between Jews and Arabs. Someone else, please take it on. And who's ready to take it on but the United Nations, which is formed after World War II ends? Of course, at this time, you have about 100,000 Jews waiting to go somewhere. They're all in in camps because they have lost their home, they've lost their money, they've lost their loved ones who have been murdered in the Holocaust and have nowhere to go. And the world understands how precarious, how dangerous, how difficult it is for a Jew to be alive in the world with so much hatred. And the Holocaust, the Shoah, really makes that clear. So the British decide to leave in 1947. On November 26th, the UN General Assembly of the United Nations proposed the partition plan, which is right here, and the actual plan is right here. Israel says, yes, we want it, with the orange spaces being for a Jewish state, the Arab state being in pink, and the Palestinian Arabs and the Arab nations around say, no go, we don't want this. So the mandate officially, the British mandate officially ends, or we know it is about to end. But the next 6 months are really what I want to talk about for a moment, because we know that the British are leaving, and we know the General Assembly said this is how Israel is going to look once the British leave. And those 6 months are basically both sides getting ready for the war that they know will come. And in that moment, the job of the Yishuv, the job of the pre-Israel government, is to make battle lines very clear, to make sure there is a Jewish area that can be fought against. And during that time, 700,000 Arabs are expelled from Israel. And when Palestinians, Arabs speak about in peace process about a right of return, this is what they're speaking about. They're saying, hey, 700,000 of us were pushed to leave, were asked to leave, left on our own, were forcibly, were forced to leave, and we want to have our homes back. We want to have a right to return to Israel. So the British mandate officially ends in 1948, and the next day after Israel declares itself a state, the Arab nations surrounding attack Israel. And from this position, the end of that war of independence, Israel now looks like this in the orange. At that moment, when Israel becomes a state, and even during the fighting, 850,000 Jews are expelled from Arab lands and are forced to and move to Israel. So there's a tremendous a transfer of population. Arabs expelled first, Jews expelled from their land, and maybe that's some kind of balance as well. I want to take us now from the steps of partition, of the UN partition map, to the Israel of 2005. So here we go. So the first map you know about because of the War of Independence. This is the map that is created right after that War of Independence. Um, our next map happens because of the tremendous defeat and the humiliation of that defeat. The Arab nations around Israel have decided we will never give up our wish to get rid of Israel, and that is why in 1967 there is the Six-Day War. Israel strikes first in the Six-Day War and destroys the Egyptian Air Force in one day, most of the Syrian Air Force in one day, and has an amazing victory. By the time the Six-Day War is over, Israel is 3 times the size that it was before, and Israel has actually conquered all of Jerusalem as well. A famous picture of these soldiers at the Western Wall. Here's a picture of them then and today, since 1967 was really not that long ago. This was a tremendous defeat and a tremendous source of pride for Israel, tremendous defeat, and that is why on 1973 there is again an attack made by Egypt and Syria. This time Israel is less prepared. Yom Kippur War. They receive some indication that the war is about to happen and request a opportunity to strike first, but that request internationally is denied. But eventually Israel wins the Yom Kippur War and basically ends up with a very similar map to what was in the Six-Day War one. Egypt decides that we're not going to win this war. We're not going to defeat Israel, so at least we want our Sinai Peninsula back. In March of 1976, Begin and Sadat, with President Carter, signed the Israel-Egypt Peace Treaty, and the Sinai Peninsula is given back to Egypt for peace. And that really brings us to this map right here. And you'll see the three places on this map in green, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and Gaza, are areas that have a lot of Arabs living there, are areas that Israel conquered and now occupied at this point, because this was area that they took over during these wars. And the real question is, why are we occupying? Well, the idea is either we give back these areas when people say we want when the countries surrounding say we will give you peace if you let us have that land, or we keep that area, that occupied land, because we believe that it will give us greater peace. So there is a history of peace treaty attempts that are initiated by Israel, and I just want to go through two major attempts at peace. One is in 1993, the Oslo Agreements, where the head of the PLO, who was an arch enemy of Israel, Israel realizes that actually he could be the leader of a Palestinian state. So maybe if we give him some power, he will turn from bad to good. President Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin, there's a famous handshake that happens. And the idea of the Oslo Accord is, if there is quiet and if there is peace over a period of 5 years, Israel will gradually pull back from the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and allow the Palestinian Authority to rule those areas. The response to that moment after the handshake was called the Intifada, was tremendous uprising of Palestinian people against this plan. The second peace treaty I want to talk about, which I found very, very ambitious in 2000, is the Camp David Summit, where Ehud Barak says that this is what Israel is willing to do, to give up all of the dark gray area of the West Bank and give that to the Palestinians, to give up all of Gaza, and to create a road connecting the two of them that is a protected road. And after that moment, we see the rise of suicide bombings and the rise of Hamas as well. The tremendous frustration about the inability of Israel to trade land for peace then brings the conversation of, well, if we can't give away this land for peace, we need to keep it for security reasons. And now we have the rise of something called religious Zionism. If you remember the map of Israel from the Torah, the map here, the religious Jews in Israel looked at this map and said, hey, the land that we've been trying to get rid of, that's land that was promised the Jewish people in the Torah. Let's go and settle that land, and that will be good for security for us, and will also be fulfilling what the Torah wants for us as well. So so in the past 20 years, you see the rise of settlements created by Jews. Some of these are allowed and some of these are even not allowed, but Jews have gone to these areas and settled this land for the reasons of security and for the reasons because they believe that the Torah has given them that land itself. So, of course, this makes it much harder to ever think about giving away this land, because in order to do that, any kind of peace treaty would require all of these areas in green, to all the people, the Jews living there, to leave for the other parts of Israel. And this brings us to the Gaza Strip. So 20 years ago, you'll see that actually there were Jewish settlements all around in Gaza, specifically for security reasons. But 18 years ago, in 2005, the prime minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, said, we are leaving Gaza, even though we cannot guarantee that there will be peace. Leaving Gaza is the best thing for Israel's security. And what Israel did was, they said, the people who were ruling the Palestinian Authority, ruled by Fatah, let's make them the rulers of this area of Gaza as well. The problem is, 1 year is a few months later, the Hamas is democratically elected by the people of Gaza, and they throw out the Fatah rulership. And of course, for the past 16 years, we've had Hamas in control of Gaza, and Hamas in their charter does not recognize Israel. Their main goal is to erase Israel, and they've been labeled as a terrorist organization. Symbols of this last 16 years are the Iron Dome intercepting rockets that often come from Gaza. So there have been kind of back and forth fighting where rockets go. Rockets are intercepted by the Iron Dome of Israel. And at times, Israel actually goes in and has to go into Gaza and bombs Gaza as well, or tries to put down some of these uprisings in Gaza. But these haven't changed any kind of, the situation hasn't changed in the 16 years when Hamas was in control. Also, a symbol of these years are all of these bomb shelters being built in the areas around Gaza. So anyone living in these areas, Sderot is a place very close by, our people have to know that at any moment they may need to run for their life to a bomb shelter, because Hamas from Gaza will throw rockets in their direction. Until October 7th, Simchat Torah, where we see these horrible images of, and really that brings us to this day. So the goal of this video was to get us to a moment where you can write down your what questions and your why questions. We want to know what those questions are. We want to provide forum at TVT to talk about those questions and to provide the best answers possible for those questions. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for sharing your questions and submitting them. Take care.